Hello, friends. Night has already fallen, and the day was long and tiring. And now, it is time to rest. As always, I will tell you a kind legend that once took place in our beloved Middle-earth. So, settle in comfortably, gently close your eyes, and let our journey begin. The wind that swept the plains of Gorgoroth carried no warmth. It was a dry, whispering breath, filled with the smell of ash and old fire. Where once the towers of Barad-dûr had clawed at the sky, only a jagged crown of blackened stone remained. The land slept uneasily beneath the dawn of a new age, for though Sauron's eye was gone, his shadow had not yet faded entirely. From the east came a small company of riders, rangers of Ithilien in dark green cloaks, their banners bound in silence. At their head rode Captain Halion, a man of stern face and watchful eyes. The scars of war marked his hands, though his spirit bore heavier wounds than flesh could show. He had fought in the War of the Ring, and had seen the end of the Dark Lord with his own eyes. Yet now, as he gazed across Mordor's endless waste, a deep unease stirred within him. By his side rode Lindir, an elf of Rivendell, tall and fair, his silver hair catching what little light dared touch that land. He had not come for battle but for knowledge, for the remnants of dark power that still lingered, hidden and waiting. The elves believed that where great evil had fallen, the scars upon the earth endured, and if those scars were left untended, they might fester once more. Their company numbered 12, rangers, scouts, and 2 scholars from Minas Tirith, sent by the king's command. They spoke little as they rode. Every sound, every whisper of wind, every distant crack of stone seemed like a breath drawn by something unseen. "Do you feel it?" Halion asked quietly, his gaze fixed on the black horizon. Lindir's eyes narrowed. "Yes, this land has not yet forgotten its master, nor been forgotten by him." They made camp that night near the ruins of Durthang, an old fortress of the enemy now reclaimed by the king's men. The walls stood broken, the gates torn down, yet the air around them seemed to hum faintly, as though the stones remembered pain. The scholars, Borlas and Meneldir, unpacked their scrolls and records, poring over maps from the Second Age. Borlas, a thin man with restless hands, was the younger of the two, his curiosity sharp and unguarded. He spoke eagerly of the legends surrounding Barad-dûr, and of whispers that had reached Minas Tirith, rumors of spirits seen by night, moving like black fire across the plain. "The old tales say," he murmured, tracing a line across the map, "that Sauron was not alone, that he bound lesser spirits to his will, fragments of the same dark fire from which he was made. What if, when he fell, those fires did not go out, but scattered?" Halion frowned. "If that were true, Gondor would have seen signs, corruption, sickness, unrest. Yet the land lies silent." "Too silent," Lindir replied softly, his eyes glinting in the dim firelight. "Evil seldom dies in peace. It clings to memory, and to things once loved by shadow. That night, sleep came to none of them easily. The rangers kept watch by turns, and those who slept dreamt of black towers rising from the dust and voices calling from beneath the ground. In the darkest hour before dawn, a sentry cried out. A shape, tall and cloaked, had appeared upon a distant ridge, lit faintly by the stars. By the time Halion reached the lookout, the figure was gone. Only the marks of burned earth remained where it had stood. "Footprints?" Meneldir whispered. Halion knelt. "No, just ash." They pressed onward at first light. Their path led southward, toward the shadow of Barad-dûr's ruins, where no living thing yet dared to dwell. The land grew more desolate with each league. Black glass and twisted stone rose from the soil like bones thrust from the earth. The very air seemed to thicken with heat and memory. As the sun sank behind the mountains, they came upon a valley, scorched and cracked, as if the world itself had been burned hollow. At its center stood a mound of fused rock, glimmering faintly red beneath the twilight, a place that had once been the foundation of the dark tower. Lindir's voice broke the silence. Here the shadow was strongest. Here his spirit broke. But even as he spoke, a faint sound drifted across the plain, a low, mournful cry, like a horn echoing from beneath the ground. It rose, faded, and rose again, until the air quivered with its sorrow. Horses reared and snorted in fear. "Form ranks!" Halion shouted, drawing his sword. The rangers circled, torches flaring against the darkness. Then, out of the mist that gathered around the mound, shapes began to form. Tall and thin, shrouded in smoke. They were not solid, yet their presence pressed upon the heart like a cold hand. 13 in number they stood, encircling the mound like sentinels. Borlas fell to his knees, his voice trembling. "The 13 demons," he whispered. "They are real." Halion felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. The air pulsed with dread. For the first time since the war, he felt the shadow of Mordor stirring again, not as a kingdom of men or orcs, but as something older and deeper. Lindir's voice came low and steady beside him. "These are not wraiths. They are remnants of the flame that once served him. His will is gone, yet their hunger remains." The 13 shadows turned their faceless heads toward the company. One by one, their forms flared with dim crimson light, like coals awakening from long sleep. And then, in a voice that seemed to come from every stone, every gust of wind, they spoke as one. "The crown must return." The torches guttered, the air froze, and Halion knew their true quest had only just begun. The echo of that terrible voice lingered in the air, long after the shapes had faded back into mist. None of the company moved. Even the wind held its breath, as if fearing to stir the ashes that now blanketed the valley. Halion sheathed his sword slowly, though his hand trembled. He had seen the Nazgul fall and the Dark Tower crumble, but what he had witnessed this night was different. Colder, older. Not malice born of ambition, but of pure remembrance. At length he spoke. "We return to Dothang. None shall remain in this place by night." No one argued. They rode hard, though the land itself seemed to resist their passage. Shadows bent strangely across the plain. Their torches guttered and flickered blue. More than once, Halion thought he heard voices whispering in the wind, half-formed words in a tongue that once commanded armies and turned hearts to dust. When at last the black walls of Dothang loomed ahead, dawn had begun to pale the eastern sky. The fortress seemed a refuge, though its stones were dark and cold as ever. They barred the gates and kindled great fires in the hall. Borla sat apart from the others, staring into the flames. His eyes shone with a feverish light. Meneldir approached him cautiously. "You saw them, Borlas," he said quietly. "Whatever they were not spirits of the dead. They were bound to this land. Let us report to the king and leave this cursed place." But Borlas shook his head. "No. They spoke of a crown, don't you see? If such a relic exists, something of Sauron's own making, it must be found and destroyed, or reclaimed lest others seek it." Halion overheard him and stepped forward. "There will be no seeking of dark relics. Our orders are to cleanse and guard, not to unearth what should remain buried." Lindir looked up from where he sat, polishing his blade. "Captain," he said softly, it may not be so simple. If what these shadows spoke of truly exists, it could draw the remnants of evil back to life. We cannot leave it unguarded, or unknowing. Halion's brow furrowed. Then we find it, and ensure it cannot harm any living soul. That night they rested, though rest brought little peace. Halion dreamed of a tower rebuilt from smoke, its crown gleaming red like molten stone. He woke before dawn, his heart heavy, and found Borlas already awake, studying a piece of scorched parchment he had taken from the archives. "It speaks of the crown of Morgul," Borlas said, when Halion approached. "Forged in secret by Sauron's own hand during the long silence before his final rise. It was said to be a vessel of command. Through it, he could bind his lesser servants, even those of the same flame. If fragments of it remain, that would explain the demons." "Fragments," Orleon echoed. "Yes," Borlas said, excitement creeping into his voice. "The crown was shattered when Barad-dûr fell, but its shards could still hold power. The demons spoke of returning it. They must be drawn to one piece that yet endures." Before Halion could reply, the cry of a horn rang from the watchtower. A scout descended in haste. "Movement upon the plain," he shouted. "Shapes in the distance, riders perhaps, but not men. They move without sound." Halion ordered the gates shut, and the archers to their posts. He and Lindir climbed to the parapet. Far off in the grey light, black forms flickered like smoke across the land, swift and formless. "They hunt," Lindir murmured. "But not for us." "Then for what?" Halion demanded. The elf's gaze was distant. "For the shard. The crown's call has awakened them, and they will not rest until it is found." At noon, the scouts returned with grim tidings. Near the southern edge of the plain, among the crumbled ruins of a lesser fortress, they had found strange markings burned into the ground, rings of soot arranged around a pit of molten stone. At its center lay a single piece of black metal, curved and jagged, half buried in ash. Halion ordered the company to ride at once. By evening they reached the place. The shard lay there still, faintly glowing in the dim light, as though hot from some invisible forge. Lindir knelt beside it, his eyes wide with awe and dread. "This is no common metal," he said. "It bears the mark of the Gorthor, the cruel hand of the enemy himself. Touch it not." Borlas, however, could not look away. "Do you not feel it?" he whispered. "It calls, like a heart still beating beneath the earth." Halion drew his cloak tighter. "We destroy it here." But as they prepared oil and torch, a tremor shook the ground. The wind turned suddenly cold, and the ash rose in whirling columns. From the shadows around them, voices began to murmur, soft at first, then growing louder, chanting in a forgotten tongue. The rangers formed a circle, blades drawn. The ground cracked, and from its fissures poured a black mist that gathered and took form. Once more the 13 appeared, ringed around the shard like priests around an altar. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, its eyes like embers beneath a hood of shadow. When it spoke, its voice was many voices at once, a chorus of flame and sorrow. "Give back the crown," it said. "It is not yours to unmake." Halion raised his sword. "The age of your master is over. His works shall perish with him." A ripple passed through the demons, like the stirring of smoke in wind. The leader's form twisted, and from within its shadow burst a hand of red fire that struck the ground before Halion, sending him reeling. "Foolish child of flesh," it hissed. "You cannot destroy what was forged of spirit. The shard endures as long as we endure, and we endure as long as the crown calls." Lindir's voice rang clear amid the chaos. "Then we shall silence its call." He lifted his hands, and from his lips flowed a chant in Quenya, pure and bright as starlight. The demons shrieked and drew back, their forms thinning as if burned by light. The shard flared crimson, then dimmed, its glow fading into blackness. But as the light faded, so too did Lindir's strength. He staggered, pale as frost, and would have fallen had Halion not caught him. The demons withdrew into the smoke, their voices fading but not gone. Borlas stared at the dark shard, now lifeless and cold. "You see?" he breathed. "It sleeps, but it is not dead." Halion turned to him sharply. "We bury it deep, and we speak of this to no one until we stand before the king himself." Yet even as he spoke, he saw the hunger in Borlas's eyes, and knew that the true danger might not lie in Mordor's ashes, but in the hearts of those who sought to master them. That night, as the company camped among the broken stones, Halion dreamed once more. In his dream, he stood before a throne of flame. Upon it sat no figure, only a crown of black iron floating in the air, whispering his name. When he awoke, the shard was gone. The night had not yet surrendered to dawn when Halion woke to find Borlas's bedroll empty. The air within the camp was still, heavy with the chill of the east wind. He rose at once, hand upon his sword, and strode among the sleeping rangers until his fears were confirmed. The shard, once wrapped in a cloth of elven make and bound within a chest of iron, was gone. A shout broke from one of the sentries atop the ruin's wall. "Captain, a rider upon the plain!" Halion sprang to the tower, Lindir close behind him. In the first grey light they saw a lone figure galloping southward, cloak billowing like a dark banner. The hoofbeats echoed faintly across the waste, and each struck Halion's heart with dread. "Borlas," he muttered. "He takes it to them." Without waiting for command, Halion swung into the saddle. "He cannot go far," he called to the men. "2 riders with me. The rest guard the camp. If we do not return by nightfall, flee to Ithilien and tell the king that Mordor stirs anew." Lindir mounted beside him. "You will not go without me," the elf said simply, and the 2 rode into the grey dawn. The land stretched barren and broken before them, a wasteland of ash and stone. Black glass glittered where the fires of Mount Doom had once poured rivers of flame. Far ahead, a thin dust trail marked the flight of their quarry. For hours they rode in silence, until at last they found Borlas's horse wandering riderless among the rocks. Not far away, tracks led toward the mouth of a ravine, dark and jagged, like the wound of some ancient blade. Halion dismounted. He entered there. They followed the narrow path between walls of scorched stone until the air grew thick with heat and the light dimmed, though no cloud veiled the sun. A foul odor filled the air, sulfur and something older, like decay, mingled with iron. Then they saw him. Borlas knelt before a black pit at the ravine's heart, the shard resting on the ground before him. His face was pale, his eyes fever-bright. "Borlas!" Halion's voice echoed through the hollow. "Step away from it." The scholar turned slowly, and there was something not quite human in his gaze. "It speaks to me," he whispered. "Not in words, but in thought. It knows things, secrets beyond the grasp of men or elf. With it, Gondor could command the shadows instead of fearing them." Lindir stepped forward, his voice calm but hard. "You think to master that which mastered the Nine? Foolish man. Already it feeds on you." Borlas laughed, a brittle sound. "It needs a will to shape it. His will is gone, but mine remains. Why should I not command what is left behind?" Halion's heart tightened. "Because it is poison, Borlas. Let it go." But even as he spoke, the ground trembled. A thin wail rose from the pit, a sound like the wind moaning through hollow bones. The shard began to glow faintly. red seeping through the black metal like blood through a wound. Shadows gathered around Borlas, whispering in tongues long lost to the world. Lindir's voice rose in song again, pure and terrible, but this time the shadows did not shrink. They thickened, took form, and from them emerged the 13. Their eyes burned as coals beneath hooded faces, their bodies shifting as if made of smoke and iron. One spoke. He calls and we come. The bearer has offered his will. Borlas turned towards them, trembling but defiant. Then serve me. The demon lord laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the ravine. Serve? We serve no mortal flesh, but through you, the flame may live. The air ignited. A ring of fire burst from the shard, encircling Borlas. Halion lunged forward, but Lindir caught his arm. No, the fire is not of this world. It will consume all who touch it. Borlas screamed as the light enveloped him. The ground cracked, and the pit erupted in a storm of heat and ash. The rangers fell back, shielding their faces. When the flames at last subsided, Borlas was gone. In his place stood a figure, cloaked in darkness, its form half shadow, half flesh. Where its heart should have been, the shard glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm like breath. The 13 knelt before it. The crown is reborn, they whispered. The will is renewed. Halion's blood ran cold. He is lost, he murmured, and they have found a master once more. Lindir drew his sword, its elven steel shining with white light. Then we shall make this his tomb. The newly risen creature turned its face toward them, and for a heartbeat, Halion saw Borlas's eyes within the shadow, pleading, terrified, and then gone. It raised a hand, and black fire leapt from the ground. The rangers were thrown back, as if struck by a storm. Halion struggled to rise, his ears ringing, his sword buried somewhere in the ash. Lindir stood between him and the creature, chanting words of warding that flared like silver lightning. The demons recoiled, but not far. The power binding them was growing stronger with every breath. Halion seized his blade and shouted above the roar, "Lindir, the pit! If the shard draws its strength from this place, we must break it apart." The elf nodded once. With a cry, he leapt through the circle of flame, landing upon the broken stones beside the pit. He drove his sword deep into the ground, channeling light into the fissures below. The earth shuddered, cracked open, and a column of fire erupted skyward. The demons shrieked and scattered, their forms twisting and dissolving in the glare. The creature that had been Borlas staggered, clutching at its chest as the shard within him flared white-hot. For a heartbeat, his face returned, eyes wide with pain and horror. "End it!" he gasped. "Please end it!" Halion hesitated only a moment. Then he raised his sword and hurled it with all his strength. The blade struck true, piercing the heart of the shadow. There was a sound like thunder, and the world turned white. When the light faded, Halion lay upon the ground, his body aching, the air thick with dust and heat. The pit had collapsed into itself, sealing the shard beneath tons of molten rock. The 13 were gone. Lindir knelt beside him, weary but alive. "It is done," he said softly. Halion looked at the ruin around them. Done, for now. But evil such as this never dies easily. Together they returned to the surface, the first stars of evening glimmering through the haze. Behind them, the ravine smoldered, and the wind carried with it the faintest echo of a whisper. Not loud, but lingering. The crown must return. And though Halion said nothing, his heart knew the truth. Mordor's silence was only sleeping, and the night would remember. The journey back to Durthang was long and bitter. The plains of Gorgoroth lay grey and still, but beneath that stillness, Halion felt the earth's unease, as though the land itself whispered warnings he could not understand. The sky hung low and heavy with ash, veiling the stars. Not even the faint glow of Orodruin could be seen on the horizon now. Its fires had long gone cold, yet the air still reeked of sulphur and memory. Halion rode at the head of the company, his face grim and his thoughts dark. They had buried Borlas, or what remained of him, beneath a cairn of black stone. The elf Lindir had spoken words of parting in the high tongue, words meant to ease the soul of the lost. But Halion could not shake the feeling that Borlas's spirit lingered still, bound somehow to the cursed fragment buried beneath the molten rock. The rangers spoke little as they rode. All had seen things that defied the wisdom of men. Fire that lived without heat, shadows that moved with purpose, and a man consumed by something older than death itself. When at last the broken walls of Durthan came into sight, the men felt no relief. The fortress, once reclaimed as a beacon of Gondor's victory, now loomed like a tomb over the silent waste. They entered the courtyard as the first light of dawn touched the sky. The garrison that had remained behind came forth to greet them, their faces wary when they saw how few had returned. "Captain," said Sergeant Arthun, bowing low, "we feared the worst. The ground quaked in the night, and the air burned with red light toward the south. What has happened?" Halion dismounted slowly. "Evil has stirred again," he said. "Borlas is dead, and with him, much was lost. We will speak of it within." Inside the great hall, they gathered around a long table of blackened oak. Lindir stood apart, his gaze fixed upon the narrow slits that served as windows. He seemed to be listening to something far away. Halion spoke at last. "What we found in Mordor was no mere echo of darkness. 13 spirits remain, bound to the memory of their master. They seek to restore what was broken. One of our own fell to their deceit and nearly brought them power again." The men crossed themselves, and a heavy silence fell. Arthun swallowed hard. "Then what are we to do, Captain? We cannot fight what we cannot see." "We watch," Halion replied. "We strengthen the outposts along the borders, seal the tunnels and bar the passes. Mordor must remain empty. No living soul shall walk its plains until the king himself decrees otherwise." Lindir turned then, his voice low and steady. "Even emptiness cannot hold the dark forever. These spirits are not as wraiths that feed upon fear. They are fragments of a greater fire. Destroying them is beyond the strength of men. They must be bound again." Halion frowned. "And how is that to be done?" The elf's eyes glimmered with strange light. "There is law, ancient and perilous, kept in Rivendell and in the White City. The craft of the elves once forged rings to preserve and protect, and though that knowledge has long been hidden, some part of it may still serve. The shards of the crown can be sealed away, buried in such deep forgetfulness that even the shadow cannot find them." "Then we ride to Minas Tirith," Halion said at once. "The king must hear this." But before dawn the next day, the wind changed. It came from the east, carrying with it a low rumble that rolled across the plain like distant thunder. The sentries upon the walls cried out as a red glow rose upon the horizon. Mount Doom burned again. Halion stood upon the battlements, staring at the rising light. "Impossible," he whispered. "The mountain is dead." Lindir's face grew pale. "It is not fire as once was. This is no work of stone and flame, but of spirit. The shard buried in the south stirs again." Moments later, a horn sounded from the western tower. Riders approached, scouts returning from the plain. Their horses came lathered and trembling. The leader dismounted and fell to one knee before Halion. "Captain," he gasped, "the demons move again. We saw them by night, 13 shadows walking in the dust. But there was another with them, a 14th, a man's shape, burning with red light, walking at their head." Halion's heart turned cold. "Borlas." "The same," said the scout, "or what remains of him." The fortress erupted into motion. Orders rang out, the gates were barred, and the watchfires lit. Yet as the hours passed, the light from the east grew brighter, until even the black walls of Durthang glowed with its reflection. Then the tremors began, faint at first, then stronger, shaking dust from the rafters and stones from the parapets. Halion descended to the courtyard where Lindir waited, his sword unsheathed, its blade pale as starlight. "They are coming," said the elf, "not as an army, but as a storm. You cannot hold this place against them." "Then where would you have us go?" Halion demanded. "Abandon the walls, leave the way open to Ithilien?" "There are deeper paths," Lindir replied. "Old tunnels beneath the fortress, built by the servants of the enemy when Durthang was his. If the Shard calls to them, we may use those same ways to draw them into the earth and trap them there." Halion hesitated. "And if we fail, then Mordor will not sleep again," said the elf simply. The ground shuddered once more, and the choice was made for him. "Gather the men," Halion commanded. "We go below." Torches flickered against the damp walls of the lower tunnels as the company descended. The air grew thick and foul, reeking of sulphur and something older still. The stone was scarred with marks of ancient chisels, and in places, strange symbols glimmered faintly, as if written in fire long faded. They reached a vast cavern, its roof lost in shadow. At its center lay a chasm, black and bottomless, from which rose a faint red mist. Lindir stepped forward, raising his torch. "This was once a forge of the enemy," he said. "Here his servants wrought the lesser rings and the weapons of command. If there is power left in this place, it will draw them." Even as he spoke, a sound like whispering filled the air. The torches wavered, though no wind stirred. Then the whispers became a chant, rising from the darkness below. Shadows took shape among the pillars, 13 tall forms, wreathed in flame. Halion drew his sword, its steel catching the red light. "Hold the line," he cried. The demons advanced, silent but for the crackle of their own burning essence. From the chasm's edge rose a 14th figure, Borlas reborn, his eyes empty, his body a vessel for the crown's malice. Upon his brow gleamed a circlet of molten metal, incomplete yet radiant with deadly power. He raised his hand, and the air itself turned to fire. The rangers were driven back, torches extinguished. Only Lindir's blade shone now, a single point of white against the crimson dark. "Halion!" the elf shouted. "The chasm! If we can bring it down, we may bury them again." Halion saw then what had to be done. He turned to Arthon. "Take the men above. Collapse the tunnels when I give the signal." Arthon's eyes widened. "But Captain, that is an order." Reluctantly, the men withdrew, leaving Halion and Lindir alone before the oncoming fire. The shadows closed in, their whispers blending into a single, terrible voice. The crown must return. Halion met Lindir's gaze. "Then let it return to the dark." They raised their swords together, the light of the elf's blade mingling with the fire of Halion's courage, and with a cry that echoed through the ages, they charged into the storm. The cavern roared like a furnace of the underworld. Firelight danced upon pillars carved by the enemy's hand in ages past, and the air trembled beneath the clash of powers unseen by mortal eyes for an age. The 13 closed in, their forms twisting like smoke, each wreathed in its own hue of flame. some red as blood, others pale as lightning, and one dark as shadow itself. At their center stood the 14th, the broken vessel of Borlas, crowned with molten iron. Halion's sword flashed through the haze, cutting through one of the spirits. The blade passed through as through fog, yet where it struck, the creature screamed and drew back, its shape unraveling into sparks of red light. Lindir followed with a sweep of his elven steel, his voice rising in song, high and pure, the words of the elder days ringing across the chasm. The sound itself became a weapon. The spirits flinched and faltered, their chant breaking. But the crown's bearer stood unmoved. His voice, Borlas's and yet not, rose in answer, deep and terrible. "You cannot destroy what is eternal," it said. "You cannot slay what is not bound by flesh." The cavern shuddered. Cracks split the walls, and molten light poured from them, as if the veins of the mountain had awakened. Halion stumbled but held his ground, sweat and ash streaking his face. "Eternal or not," he shouted, "you shall not walk in the realm of the living." He charged forward, striking at the figure's chest. His blade met a barrier of fire that flared outward, hurling him to the ground. The crown flamed brighter, and the 13 moved as one, forming a ring around their master. Lindir's song faltered as the heat grew unbearable. His vision blurred, his strength fading, but still he sang, forcing the light of his spirit against the tide of darkness. The white glow of his sword spread like a rising dawn across the cavern floor, illuminating the carvings upon the stone, ancient runes of command, written in the tongue of Mordor. Halion rose to his knees, gasping, and saw what Lindir had revealed. The runes encircled the chasm in a great ring, a forgotten ward of binding. He realized then that this was no mere forge. It was a prison, built long ago to contain fire that could not be quenched. "Lindir," he cried, "the runes, they still hold power. If we can awaken them—" The elf understood at once. "Then the mountain itself will seal what we cannot slay." Together they fought their way toward the circle, battling through the storm of shadow and flame. Each step was agony. The ground cracked and burned beneath their boots. The demons struck like whips of lightning, each blow searing flesh and armor alike. Halion fell once, his cloak aflame, but Lindir dragged him up and pressed onward. At the ring's edge, the elf raised his blade high and began to chant anew, the ancient words of the high tongue now interwoven with those of power, light against darkness, spirit against spirit. The runes began to glow faintly, pulsing like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. The demons screamed. The crown-bearer lifted both hands, summoning a storm of fire. It roared toward them, but Halion thrust his sword into the ground and called upon every ounce of will left within him. "By the name of Elisar, by the blood of Gondor, I defy thee!" His cry joined Lindir's song, and for a moment, light filled the cavern, blinding, pure, terrible. The fire met the light and shattered. The 13 shrieked as their forms burned away, drawn screaming into the runes that flared now like rivers of molten silver. The crown-bearer staggered, clutching at his head. His voice wavered. Borlas's voice, again for a heartbeat. "Halion, end it, before it takes me again." Halion's chest clenched, but there was no time for pity. "Forgive me, friend," he whispered, and seized the torch from the ground. With a final cry, he hurled it into the chasm. The flame struck the depths, and the world exploded in light. The cavern heaved as if struck by thunder. Stone crashed from the ceiling. The floor split apart. Halion was thrown against the wall, the breath driven from his body. Lindir fell to one knee, his sword still blazing as he held the chant through the chaos. The chasm filled with fire. no longer red, but white, searing light that devoured shadow. The crown-bearer screamed, his form unraveling, the molten iron melting from his brow and pouring down into the abyss. One by one, the voices of the demons faded until only silence remained. Then the ceiling began to collapse. "Halion!" Lindir shouted. "We must go!" The captain staggered to his feet. Together they fled toward the tunnel, the ground trembling beneath them. Behind, the cavern roared as it fell in upon itself, burying forever the pit of the enemy's forge. They reached the surface as the first stones of Durthang cracked and fell. The fortress shuddered, its towers crumbling into ruin. The rangers, waiting in dread upon the walls, saw their captain and the elf emerge from the smoke. A cheer rose briefly, then was swallowed by the thunder of the mountain. The tremors ceased as suddenly as they had begun. The red glow upon the horizon dimmed and vanished. Mordor fell silent once more. For a long while, none spoke. Then Halion turned to Lindir, his voice hoarse. "Is it done?" Lindir's gaze was distant. "The fire sleeps again. We have sealed it, perhaps for a time beyond reckoning. But such spirits are of the world's first making. They cannot be destroyed by sword or song. Only the One could have unmade them. And he has gone beyond Arda." Halion looked toward the east, where the black mountains met the sky. "Then let them sleep," he said. "Let the darkness lie buried, and may no fool wake it again." In the days that followed, the ruins of Durthang were abandoned. The rangers withdrew to Ithilien, leaving only cairns of stone to mark the fallen. None were sent again into the heart of Mordor, for the king decreed that the land be left to heal in silence. Yet Halion couldn't forget. In his dreams, he saw the chasm burning still, the crown sinking deeper into the earth. And always, he heard a voice, faint but clear, whispering from the depths. The crown must return. He would wake with the sweat cold upon his brow, his hand clutching the hilt of his sword, and wonder if the victory they had won was only a reprieve. For evil, he knew, was like the mountain, dormant, not dead. And somewhere, far beneath the ruin of Mordor, in the dark where light had never reached, a single ember still glowed. Winter came early to Ithilien that year. Frost silvered the ruins, and pale mist drifted down from the Efelduth, veiling the land in quiet sorrow. The people of the king had returned to rebuild the green lands east of Anduin, yet few dared wander near the Black Gate. The shadow of Mordor lingered still, even in silence. Captain Halion rode the northern marches, where the wind from the Morannon carried whispers of the past. His hair had grown streaked with grey since that night beneath Durthang, and though his wounds had healed, the fire of that place had marked him deeper than he would admit. He spoke little, slept less, and often found his thoughts turning eastward against his will. The king had honored him, naming him Warden of the Borderlands, yet Halion felt no pride in the title. He had seen what lay beneath Mordor's skin, and knew that evil seldom dies. It only waits. One morning, as he and his men made camp among the ruins of old watchtowers, a messenger rode from Minas Tirith, cloaked in white. The man bore the seal of the king and a letter sealed in green wax. Halion broke it open and read in silence. His face hardened. "What news, Captain?" asked Arthon, now his second. "The elf Lindir is missing," Halion said. "He was last seen leaving Osgiliath, bound for the Henneth Annwn. He never arrived." Arthon frowned. "Taken by raiders?" Halion shook his head. "No. The letter says he left in haste, alone. And before he departed, he told the guards he had heard a voice calling from the east." The men exchanged uneasy glances. All remembered that voice. Before nightfall, Halion gathered a small company, and rode toward the Morgul Vale. The path led through forests still scarred by war, where roots grew among the bones of orcs and the stones of ancient battlefields. Mist rose thick upon the ground, turning the world grey and soundless. They reached the vale by dawn. The river Morgul Duin wound sluggishly through the black ravine, its waters dull and cold. The towers of Minas Morgul had long been thrown down, yet the valley still reeked of corruption. No bird sang there, and even the wind moved uneasily. Halion dismounted and motioned for silence. Upon the broken bridge that spanned the river, he found tracks, light, deliberate, the kind made by one who treads carefully upon cursed ground. "Elf steps," he murmured. "He came this way." They followed the prince across the bridge and up the old road that climbed toward the mountains. The stones were cracked and blackened, the walls fallen. In places, strange marks had been carved freshly into the rock, curves and sigils not made by any man's hand. Lindir's trail ended before a narrow fissure in the cliff face. A faint red glow pulsed within, like the dying heart of a forge. Helion drew his sword. He went inside. Arthon swallowed hard. "Shall we follow?" "We came for him," Helion said simply, and entered. The passage wound deep beneath the mountain, narrow and steep. The air was hot, stinking of ash. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a vast, hollow chamber, lit by the glow of molten stone. And there, upon a ledge above the fire, stood Lindir. He was unarmed, his white robes torn, his silver hair darkened by soot. In his hands, he held a small, black fragment of metal, the size of a man's palm, curved like part of a crown. "Lindir!" Halion called. The elf turned slowly. His eyes glimmered red in the firelight. "You should not have come." "What have you done?" Halion demanded. "I followed the voice," Lindir said softly. It called from beneath the mountain, calling for the light that bound it. "I thought to study, to learn, to see if what we sealed was truly gone. But I found this." He lifted the shard. "It is not dead, Halion. It has lain dreaming, and through dream it has found me." Halion stepped closer, careful, wary. "Put it down. That thing is poison. It devours the will." Lindir smiled faintly, and there was sorrow in it. "You think I do not know? I have fought it for days. But it speaks to me as it once did to Borlas, softly, with memory. It remembers the world before time, when fire walked free. I hear the echo of its maker in every breath. And now, it begins to awaken." The molten pool beneath them rippled, and the heat grew stronger. From the depths came a faint, rhythmic pulse, as though the mountain itself had begun to breathe. Arthon whispered, "Captain, we must go." But Halion did not move. "Lindir, listen to me. The demons are gone. You sealed them yourself. If you keep that shard, they will rise again." The elf closed his eyes. "They never left. They are bound to this piece, as we are bound to our flesh. Destroy it, and you destroy them, but you destroy me as well. For part of my strength was woven into the binding. If I die, the seal breaks." Halion's throat tightened. "Then what do you ask of me?" "To finish what we began," Lindir said. "Take it. Cast it into the fire while I yet hold them. Do not falter." Before Halion could answer, the ground shook. From the cracks in the stone, smoke poured forth, and within it, shadows stirred. 13 dark shapes rising like flames reborn. Their eyes burned like stars of ruin. Lindir gasped, staggering beneath the weight of unseen power. "Quickly!" he cried. "They come!" Halion ran forward, seized the shard from his hands, and turned toward the molten pit. The heat seared his flesh, yet he did not slow. The shadows screamed, voices echoing from every wall. "The crown must return!" Halion hurled the shard into the fire. It struck the molten surface and sank with a hiss. For a moment, all was still. Then the cavern erupted in white light, blinding and pure. The shock threw them all to the ground. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. The shadows were gone. The fire had cooled, turned to glass. But Lindir lay motionless upon the stone, his face calm, as though asleep. Halion knelt beside him. "Lindir," he whispered, but the elf did not stir. His spirit had gone west, beyond the circles of the world. Arthon approached slowly. "Is it done?" Halion rose, his voice hollow. "Yes. He has sealed them with his own life. The demons are buried in the mountain, and the shard is gone forever." They bore Lindir's body back to Ithilien and laid him to rest in the gardens of Imin Arnon. The king himself came to honor him, and all the realm mourned. But Halion could not rejoice. At night, he dreamed again of fire beneath the earth, of a whisper that would not die. And sometimes, when the wind blew from the east, he fancied he could see a faint red light upon the horizon, like a star burning where no star should be. He would stand there, silent and watchful, until dawn came. For though the world had changed, he knew the truth in his heart. Mordor does not forget, and deep beneath its blackened mountains, the last breath of its master still waited to be born again. The snows melted slowly that spring, and the land of Ithilien awoke beneath a pale sun. Wildflowers returned to the fields, and the air grew sweet again. To most, it seemed that peace had truly come at last, that the war and its long shadow had faded into memory. Yet for Captain Halion, peace was a mask worn by restless earth. He felt it in the wind that blew from the east, too cold, too heavy with the scent of ash. He dwelt now in Imin Arnon, at the edge of the forest, where the king's wardens kept watch over the mountains. By day, he oversaw the rebuilding of the border outposts. By night, he walked alone among the trees. It was said he seldom slept, and that sometimes, when the moon was thin and red, he would ride eastward toward the dark horizon, as though drawn by some unseen call. Months passed thus, until one evening a rider came from Minas Tirith. The man carried a sealed scroll, and upon it was written the king's own hand. Halion broke the seal and read. When he looked up, his face was pale. Arthon, who still served him faithfully, stepped forward. "What is it, my lord?" Halion's voice was low. "A tremor has been felt in the south. Smoke rises again from the ridges near Nurnen. The king commands that we ride to learn the cause." "Another eruption?" Arthon asked. "Perhaps," Halion said. But in his heart, he knew it was no mere quaking of stone. Before dawn, they set forth with 20 men. Their journey took them through the dead plains where nothing grew, and every sound seemed swallowed by the dust. For days they rode beneath a sun that burned through a sky of grey haze, until at last they reached the foothills above the Sea of Nirn. From afar, they saw smoke drifting from a fissure in the mountain slopes. A wound opened anew. Around it, the earth was scorched black, though no flame could be seen. Halion dismounted, knelt and pressed his hand to the ground. The soil was warm. "Something stirs beneath," he murmured. As he rose, a sound reached them. Distant, faint, but unmistakable. A voice, deep and hollow, echoing through the stone. "Return the crown." Arthon went pale. "Not again. Hold steady," Halion ordered, though his own heart clenched. "Form a circle, keep the torches lit." They approached the fissure. It gaped wide, breathing faint heat. Within its depths flickered a dull red glow. Halion peered inside and froze. Far below, upon a ledge of stone, something moved. It was not a man, nor yet a shadow. It glimmered like molten metal, shifting, shaping itself as if in the act of being forged anew. Arthur whispered, "The shard. But we destroyed it." "No," Halion said grimly. "We buried it. There is a difference." As they watched, the light below flared brighter. Then came the tremor, sudden and fierce. The ground split, throwing men from their feet. Fire leapt skyward, and from it burst a shape like a storm of ash and flame. The company scattered, crying out as the wind drove them to the ground. When Halion raised his head, he saw a figure standing upon the ridge, a tall form cloaked in fire, with no face but for a burning crown. It spoke in a voice that was many voices. "You cannot bind me. You cannot silence the fire that was before your kind was named." Halion drew his sword. "You have no place in this world. Go back to the dark." The figure laughed, the sound like cracking stone. "I am of the dark, and the dark has no end." It lifted a hand, and the fire surged. The rangers fell back, blinded by the glare. Halion alone stood firm, though the heat scorched his skin and the hilt burned in his grasp. "Arthur," he shouted, "the oil! Bring it forth!" The men obeyed, dragging the barrels forward. They poured their contents into the fissure, while Halion held the creature's gaze. Its flames wavered, dimming for an instant, as though the strength of its shape faltered. Then, with a cry, Halion seized a torch and flung it down. The fire roared, bursting outward in a torrent of flame that swallowed the fissure and the creature with it. The air thundered, and for a heartbeat, the world turned white. When the smoke cleared, the ridge was gone. A blackened scar stretched where the fissure had been, and the mountain's heart burned no more. Arthur limped toward him, coughing. "Is it ended?" Halion stared at the ruin. "No," he said softly. "That was not its true form. Only a shadow of what lies beneath." They buried their dead and rode north again, their hearts heavy. That night, Halion sat apart from the others, gazing at the stars that trembled faintly through the haze. He felt something in his hand then, a faint pulse, like the echo of a heartbeat. He looked down. Around his wrist, his steel bracer had cracked, and within the break glowed a single thread of red light. He tore it away and flung it to the ground, but the glow did not fade. It sank into the soil and was gone. Lindir's last words returned to him. The spirits cannot die. They must be bound. And he knew, with cold certainty, that the binding had broken. When they reached Ithilien again, Halion went straight to Minas Tirith. The white tower gleamed in the sun, serene and strong. Yet as he passed through its halls, he felt again that same tremor beneath his feet, the heartbeat of something sleeping deep under the world. The King Elisar received him in the high chamber, surrounded by the banners of the reunited kingdom. He listened in silence as Halion told his tale. When the captain finished, the king's face was grave. "You have done what few could," Elisar said. "But this fire you speak of, if it rises again, it must be faced not by sword or courage alone. I will send word to the north, to the elves that remain, and to the dwarves of Erebor. If ancient craft awoke this evil, perhaps ancient craft can seal it once more." Halion bowed his head. "And if they cannot? Then we will face it as men must," said the king. "For the shadow may return, but so shall the strength of the West." Halion left the hall with little comfort. As he rode from the city gates that night, he looked back once. The white tower shone like a star, proud and bright, but beyond it, far in the east, a faint red glimmer smoldered against the horizon. It was small, distant, almost unseen, but to Halion it looked like the crown of fire burning anew, and though he did not speak it aloud, he knew the truth that none wished to hear. Mordor was waking again. Spring ripened into summer, and still the unease did not fade. From the high watchtowers of Ithilien, men spoke of strange lights in the east, faint glimmers that danced along the mountains at night, like the reflection of a hidden forge. Travelers on the northern roads whispered of tremors beneath their feet, and shepherds near the Sea of Nirn swore the waters sometimes glowed red when the moon was dark. Captain Halion rode tirelessly from post to post, strengthening the watch. He hid his fears behind duty, though his eyes grew hollow and sleepless. The king's envoys had come and gone, bringing tidings from far realms. None could offer answers. The elves of Rivendell sent word that their lore held no record of spirits such as these. The dwarves spoke only of deep fires that never die. So the burden remained with men. One night, as Halion stood upon the eastern battlement, the wind shifted. It carried a low, humming sound, faint but constant, like the beating of wings far away. He frowned and turned his gaze eastward. Upon the horizon, a single red spark flared and vanished, then flared again, steady this time, as though calling. Arthon joined him, silent at first. At length he said, "It grows stronger. I feel it in my bones." Halion nodded. It calls to all that remembers the shadow. The land itself listens. A week later, a rider from Nirn arrived, half dead with exhaustion. He was brought before Halion in the morning light, pale and shaking. "My lord," he gasped, "the earth burns near Lithled. Mines collapse, and the ground glows as in the days before the Dark Lord fell. And voices rise from the deep places. Men flee the fields, saying the mountain speaks." Halion dismissed him gently and turned to Arthon. "Prepare the company. We ride south." They rode for 3 days, their path winding through lands, half reclaimed by green, half still scarred and lifeless. The closer they came to Nirn, the stronger the heat grew. On the 4th day, they reached a ridge overlooking the great plain, and there they saw it. A fissure had opened in the earth, vast and terrible, stretching for miles. Smoke poured from it like the breath of a sleeping beast, and within that smoke flickered fire of a strange hue, neither red nor gold, but a deep, living crimson. The men stood silent. Even the horses shied and would not move closer. Halion's jaw tightened. This is no wound of stone. Something below seeks to rise. They made camp upon the ridge, setting guards at every side. That night, Halion could not sleep. He walked alone to the cliff's edge and looked down. The light from the fissure pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Then a voice spoke behind him. "You should not have come." Halion turned sharply, hand on hilt. A figure stood in the gloom, a tall man, cloaked in grey, his face hidden by the hood. But the voice was familiar. Too familiar. "Lindir," Halion breathed. The figure lowered its hood, and Halion's heart froze. It was indeed Lindir, or what had once been him. His hair was streaked with ash, his eyes pale as moonstone, and his skin bore faint lines of red light, as if the fire beneath the mountain burned within him. "You are dead," Halion whispered. "Part of me is," Lindir said softly, "but part was bound to the fire when we sealed it. I have wandered the shadows since, and the voices of the 13 call to me. They would rise again." Halion's grip tightened. "Then help me stop them." Lindir's eyes flickered with sorrow. "Would that I could. But the shard we cast into the fire was not destroyed. It was scattered. 13 fragments for 13 spirits. Each calls to its brethren, seeking to reforge the crown. When they are joined again, their master's flame will take form anew." "Where are they?" Halion demanded. "Everywhere," Lindir said. "In the stones of Mordor, in the dust, in the hearts of those who dream of power. You cannot fight them as you would an enemy. They are thought and will, pieces of Sauron's own making. Yet there is one way to end them. What way? The shards must be drawn together, Lindir said. All 13 brought to one place, and then cast into the deepest fire left in Middle-earth, the cracks of doom. Only there may they be unmade. Halion stared into the glowing fissure below. Then it begins here. Lindir nodded. But beware, old friend. Each shard has chosen its keeper. Some are men. Some are worse, and the closer they come together, the more their will grows. Already they seek the one who can bear them all. The elf's form began to fade like mist. Find them, Halion, before they find you. And then he was gone. Halion stood alone as dawn broke over the plain. When he returned to camp, his men found him silent and pale. Arthur asked, "What did you see?" Halion's eyes, once grey as the sea, seemed darker now, reflecting the red light below. "A warning," he said, "and a task that may outlive us all." They descended into the plain that day, but found nothing more than cracked earth and smoking vents. Yet Halion knew what he had heard was no dream. He gathered his men and spoke quietly. "Listen well. What we fought beneath Durthang was but a shadow. 13 shards remain, each carrying the spirit of the demons we faced. If they are found, if they are joined, a darkness greater than any since the ring will return. We must find them first." "By what sign shall we know them?" Arthon asked. "By fire that does not burn," Halion said, "and by voices that speak without breath." That night, as the men slept, Halion walked again to the fissure's edge. The glow was dimmer now, as though whatever had stirred was sinking once more into slumber. Yet when he closed his eyes, he heard faint whispers, 13 tones blending into one, calling not from below but from within. He pressed a trembling hand to his breastplate, and there, beneath the steel, he felt a slow, steady pulse of warmth, like an ember that refused to die. Far away, beyond the Efelduath, the plain of Gorgoroth lay silent. But in the depths of the ruined Barad-dûr, where the ashes of the Dark Tower had cooled to glass, something stirred. Beneath the dust, half buried in black stone, a single fragment of iron gleamed faintly red. A wind rose, soft and cold, sweeping over the plain. It carried no sound, no cry, only a whisper, faint as breath. The crown must return. And in the darkness, the ember flared. The summer waned, and dark omens gathered like storm clouds over the east. Though no open evil marched across the plains, a restlessness crept into the hearts of men. Crops failed near the borders of Mordor. Wells turned bitter. Herds took fright at unseen shapes beneath the moon. Travelers whispered of a red star that appeared some nights above the mountains, moving as no star should, fading and returning as if it followed some hidden path. In Minas Tirith, these were called fancies, the lingering fears of a war not yet forgotten. But in Ithilien, Halion knew better. He had seen the fissure and the fire beneath. He felt it even now, like a faint pressure behind his eyes, an echo of the thing he had bound and could not unbind. Autumn came with grey skies and restless winds. One evening, as he stood upon the eastern battlement, a bird descended from the high air and alighted on the stone beside him. It was a raven, wings black as midnight, bearing a small silver clasp upon its leg. The mark was that of Erebor. Halion untied the message and read it by torchlight. The script was bold and firm, the hand of Dain Ironfoot's heir. To the Warden of the East, we have felt tremors beneath our forges and veins of red fire now twist through the deep stone. Old songs stir in our halls, songs that were silent for ages. Something moves below the roots of the world. If it rises, it may reach even you. Guard your lands well. Thorin III, Stonehelm. Halion folded the parchment slowly. It spreads, he murmured. Arthun, who had come beside him, frowned. You think it reaches as far as the lonely mountain? The fire beneath Arda runs deep, Halion said. If it wakes in one place, it stirs in all. That night, he dreamed of a crown, broken, yet mending itself in the dark. 13 shards whirled about it like falling stars, drawn by a will older than stone. He woke before dawn, his breath coming in gasps. By morning he had resolved to act. He called Arthon and the captains of Ithilien to council. We can no longer wait for the king's messengers, he said. The shards move, seeking each other. We must find where they gather. And if they do not wish to be found, Arthon asked. Then they will come to us, Halion replied. I will go where they call loudest. He set forth 2 days later, with a small company of his most loyal men. Their path led once more toward the wastes of Mordor, though no banner marked their ride, and no song accompanied them. The land they entered was one of ruin and silence. Black plains split by rivers of dust, where the bones of orcs lay scattered like seeds that never grew. On the 3rd day, they came upon the ruins of Barad-dûr. The tower's shadow still seemed to lie upon the ground, though nothing of it remained but broken glass and stone. A storm gathered above, rolling clouds the color of iron. Halion dismounted, his cloak whipping in the wind. We camp here, he said. This is where it began, and where it may end. That night, as they kindled their fires among the ruins, the wind rose to a howl. Sparks were caught up and carried eastward, vanishing into the dark. Halion sat apart, staring into the flames. The red light played upon his face, and in its flicker he thought he saw movement, shapes twisting within the fire, as if shadows danced on the other side of the world. Then came a sound, soft, like distant bells. One of the men looked up sharply. "Captain, do you hear it?" Halion nodded slowly. "They are near." The fire burned lower. The air grew heavy. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them began to glow. 13 circles of faint red light appeared among the stones, surrounding their camp. "Form ranks," Halion shouted. "Blades ready!" The light swelled, and from each circle rose a figure, tall, dark, and burning from within. The 13 had come again. The men recoiled, but Halion stood his ground. "You cannot rise," he said, his voice steady, though his heart thundered. "You are bound beneath the earth." One of the shadows stepped forward. Its voice was like molten iron. "We are bound no longer. The shards awaken, and the fire remembers its form." The others spoke as one. The crown must return. Then came the wind, fierce and sudden, sweeping through the ruins and extinguishing every flame. The company was cast into darkness, lit only by the glow of the spirits. Halion drew his sword. "You shall not pass from this place. I banish you in the name of the king." The leader of the spirits laughed, a sound that shook the stones. "Your king is mortal. We were before kings were named." The spirits advanced. The men fought bravely, striking with steel that passed through smoke. Yet each blow met resistance, as if the shadows themselves bore substance. Sparks flew, where blades touched flame. One by one the rangers fell, their cries lost in the roar of the storm. Halion fought toward the heart of the ruin, where a pit gaped wide, filled with red light. There, half buried in ash, he saw it, a jagged fragment of metal, curved like a crown's edge. It pulsed with life, calling to the fire around it. He seized it in both hands, ignoring the burning pain that seared his flesh. "If this is your heart," he cried, "then I will end it." He turned and flung it into the pit. For a moment, silence fell. Then the ground split, and a column of fire shot skyward, devouring the darkness. The spirits shrieked, their forms unraveling. The wind turned wild, scattering them like ash. The storm broke apart. When the light faded, only ruin remained. Of the company, few survived. Arthur knelt beside his captain, whose hands were blackened from the fire. "You have done it," he said. Helion opened his eyes slowly. "No, not yet. This was but one shard." He looked eastward, where faint thunder rolled beyond the mountains. "The others still burn?" Arthur bowed his head. "Then what hope have we?" Halion's voice was weary, yet resolute. "The same we always had. To stand until the end, and when we fall, to make sure the darkness falls with us." They buried their dead beneath the shadow of the ruined tower. At dawn, Halion mounted his horse and turned once more toward the rising sun. Far away, beyond the Efelduth, 13 flames flared in answer, scattered across the land. And deep beneath the ruin of Barad-dûr, where his sword had struck the stone, a whisper rose from the pit. Quiet, almost gentle, but filled with promise. The crown remembers. Winter came down from the north like a slow tide of grey. The plains of Gorgoroth lay hushed beneath a thin veil of frost, and the black mountains loomed silent as tombstones against the pale sky. Yet the silence was uneasy, for beneath that frozen earth old powers stirred, and the breath of hidden fires warmed the stones from below. Halion rode alone now. His company was scattered, some slain, some sent back to guard the borders of Ithilien. Only Arthur remained at his side, loyal though his strength waned with the years. The two men moved eastward, following signs few could read. The faint tremors in the ground, the crimson flicker that haunted the edges of the night, the dreams that came like whispers through the cold. It had been many months since the battle at Barad-dûr. The king's messengers had come with orders to withdraw, to let the land rest. But Halion could not obey. In every quiet dawn he felt the call of the crown, low and patient, like the toll of a distant bell. It called not in words but in longing, and it spoke to the deepest part of him that had ever known fear. He dreamed of Lindir often. In those dreams the elf walked through fields of ash, his eyes like starlight dimmed by sorrow. "It is not over," Lindir would whisper. 13 flames remain. One seeks you. On a pale morning beneath a colorless sky, Halion and Arthur came upon a ruin unlike any they had seen before. Half buried in the dust stood a fortress carved into the mountainside, older than Gondor, older even than Mordor itself. Its gates were of stone, shaped in the likeness of serpents, and its archways were lined with black runes. "What place is this?" Arthur murmured. Halion dismounted, brushing frost from the ancient marks. "This is Nargoth, the hidden forge of the enemy in the days before the tower was built. Here his servants made weapons of command, rings and crowns alike." The air within the ruin was still and thick with age. As they entered, their torches burned with blue flame, casting long shadows across the cracked walls. In the great hall they found a stair descending into the mountain's heart. From below came a faint red glow and the distant sound of dripping water. They followed it down into a vast chamber, where molten stone glimmered through fissures in the floor. At the center stood a dais of black iron, and upon it lay a single shard of metal no larger than a man's hand. It pulsed softly, as if breathing. Halion approached it slowly. "Another fragment," he said, voice low. the second of 13. Arthur caught his arm. "Touch it not. Let us bring it to the king." But Halion's gaze was fixed upon the shard. He felt its pull, a slow, relentless tide drawing him forward. It was not malice that called to him, but memory, as though the thing sought a keeper to give it form again. He forced himself back, sheathing his sword. "No, you are right. It must be taken to Minas Tirith, locked away or destroyed." Before he could move, a voice filled the chamber. "It cannot be destroyed!" Both men turned sharply. At the edge of the light stood a figure in tattered robes of black. Its face was hidden by a hood, but from beneath it gleamed eyes of red fire. Arthur raised his sword. "Who speaks?" The figure laughed softly. "You know me, Captain of Gondor. You have carried my mark since the first day you set foot in Mordor." Halion's hand went to his breast. The faint warmth he had long felt there now burned like a brand. "You are one of them. I am the first," the figure said. "When Sauron fell, I was not broken, only freed. My brothers slumber still, but I have waited for this moment, the gathering of the shards. Do you not feel it? You are bound to us. The flame lives in you." The truth struck Halion like a blade. The ember that had burned within him since the battle, it had not been mere memory. The fire had chosen him, seeking flesh to bear its will. "No," he whispered. "I am not yours." The figure spread its arms. "You cannot flee what you carry. You will bring the shards together, as was foretold. Through you, the crown will rise again." With a cry, Halion lunged forward, his sword blazing in the torchlight. The blade passed through the figure as through smoke, but the thing recoiled, its laughter breaking into a hiss. Arthur struck next, his weapon cleaving the air where the spirit had stood. The form shattered like glass, and vanished. In its place, the shard upon the dais flared bright, and the ground shook violently. Fire burst from the cracks, and the air filled with the sound of many voices crying in unison. "The crown must return!" Halion seized the shard in his cloak, though the heat seared through the cloth, and fled toward the stairs. Behind him, the chamber collapsed, stone and flame mingling in a roar that chased them upward. They burst from the gates just as the ruin fell in upon itself, sealing the darkness below. For a long time they lay upon the ground, gasping, the cold wind cutting against their scorched skin. Arthur looked at the bundle in Halion's arms. "You took it." Halion nodded wearily. "Better in my keeping than in the dark. If the shards must be gathered, let them come to me. I will be their end." "Or their servant," Arthur said quietly. Halion met his gaze. "If that happens, you must do what I cannot." They rode west that night, the shard wrapped and hidden. Yet as they journeyed, Halion felt the weight of it grow heavier, its warmth seeping through cloth and mail until it seemed to pulse in time with his heart. At dawn they reached a ridge overlooking the plain. The sky was red with morning, though no sun yet rose. Far below upon the black horizon, 13 points of light burned faintly, like distant fires answering a single call. Halion closed his eyes, the shard throbbing in his hands. In the depths of his mind, he heard a voice, soft and patient, whispering as it had whispered since the fall of Sauron. "You are the bearer. Through you we return." The wind that swept the plains of Gorgoroth no longer carried silence. It whispered. Sometimes it was the sigh of dust across stone, sometimes the dry rasp of air through broken towers. But those who still guarded the marches swore that, if one listened too long, the whisper took shape, words faint as the breath of ghosts. Halion heard them always. Days turned to weeks as he and Arthur rode westward, seeking refuge and counsel. But wherever they went, the air seemed thick with unseen eyes. The shard burned through its wrappings as though it hungered for the touch of open air. It throbbed softly, like a heart that would not die, and its warmth bled into Halion's very bones. They reached the green borders of Ithilien, beneath a grey sky. Yet even there, life seemed dimmed. The trees bent away from the wind that came out of Mordor, and the birds flew higher, as if fleeing some unseen terror. Arthon rode beside him, weary and silent. At last he spoke. "Captain, what will you do with it? You cannot keep it. It burns you, even now." Halion's hand rested on the bundle at his side. "If I cast it away, another will find it. If I destroy it, I may rouse all 13. It must be carried to the fire that can end it forever." "The cracks of doom?" Arthon said, voice low. "But that way is death. None who walk that path return." "Then death will have company," Halion replied. They rode on in silence, and that night they camped near the ruins of Osgiliath. The moon rose, full and cold, painting the broken stones with silver. As Halion sat wakeful beside the dying fire, the shard stirred again. He drew it out, unable to resist its pull. In the moonlight it gleamed like blooded steel. Then a voice spoke from the dark. "So the flame endures." Halion leapt to his feet. Across the riverbank, a tall figure stood, a man in black mail, helm shadowing his face. Yet something in his bearing was wrong. His movements were too smooth, too certain, as though guided by an unseen hand. "Who are you?" Halion demanded. The stranger stepped into the light, and Halion saw that his eyes glowed faintly red. "A servant once, a master now. One of 13, born again through the hearts of men who dreamed of power." Arthon woke with a cry, drawing his sword. But the figure only smiled. "You bear what is mine, Warden of Gondor. Give it to me, and your pain will cease." Halion raised his blade. "It will never be yours. Then it will be your ruin." The creature's hand rose, and the air darkened. The fire guttered, the river churned, and from the shadows around them, shapes began to form. Figures tall and thin, made of smoke and faint red light. They ringed the camp in silence. Arthon pressed his back to Halion's. "How many?" "Too many," Halion said. "Run when I give the word." He flung the shard into the flames. The fire roared up, blazing white. The spirits shrieked and drew back, their forms rippling like banners in a storm. Halion seized his sword and struck at the leader. The blade met flesh, not smoke, not air, but solid resistance, and sparks flew where steel met shadow. The creature staggered, but laughter echoed from its helm. "You cannot kill what shares your blood." Halion's heart turned cold. "My blood?" The voice deepened, echoing through the ruins. "Did you think the fire lay quiet in you for pity's sake? You are its vessel, its chosen hand. Long ago, when you cast my master's shard into the chasm, a spark entered you. Now it awakens." Pain flared through Halion's chest. The light beneath his armor pulsed, red and fierce. He gasped, falling to one knee. The air around him burned, and the spirits howled in triumph. Arthon cried out and lunged at the dark figure, driving his blade into its side. The creature fell back with a hiss, black smoke pouring from its wound. "Run!" Arthon shouted. "Before it takes you!" Halion rose unsteadily. "No, it ends here." He grasped the shard from the fire. It burned like molten glass, but he held it fast. "If the fire lives in me," he said, "then let it burn itself away." The leader of the spirits advanced, laughter twisting through the night. "Fool, you will only hasten our return." Halion closed his eyes. He felt the shard's heat sear into his flesh, spreading like a river of fire through his veins. The pain was beyond bearing, but beneath it, something older stirred. A light, cold and bright, like the memory of starlight before the world was made. He spoke then, not in Westron, but in a tongue he did not know he remembered. Words of power, old as the mountains, poured from his lips. The fire within him answered. The ground shook. The spirits wailed, their forms unraveling. The dark figure screamed, the red light of its eyes fading to black. Then came silence. When Halion opened his eyes again, the campfire was dead. Ash drifted through the air like snow. The shard was gone, melted into nothing. Around him lay the remains of the creatures. Shadows burned into the earth. Arthon knelt beside him. "You're alive." Halion's voice was hoarse. "Not all of me." In the faint dawn, he looked down at his hands. Faint red veins traced his skin, glowing like embers before fading again. The fire had not left him. It slept within. "What have you done?" Arthon whispered. "I have bound it again," Halion said, "but now it is bound to me." They rode south after that, for there was no returning to Minas Tirith. Halion feared what he might become if the shards called again. He spoke little, and when he slept, he dreamed of fire. In one dream, he stood upon the slopes of Orodruin, holding a crown forged of living flame. 13 spirits knelt before him, their eyes filled with obedience and dread. From the shadows, a voice spoke, his own voice, deeper, colder. "You were meant to end it. Instead, you have become its heart." He woke screaming, the night air heavy with the smell of smoke. Arthon held him until the tremors passed. By dawn, Halion was calm once more, though a great weariness had settled upon him. He looked east, where the mountains stood dark against the rising sun. "I will go to the fire," he said, "to Mount Doom. There it will end." Arthon grasped his arm. "You will not return." Halion managed a faint smile. "Then see that none follow." Without another word, he turned his horse toward the black horizon. The light of dawn caught the edge of his cloak, setting it aflame with crimson, and for a moment he seemed less a man than a shadow of fire, riding into the dark. Arthon watched until he vanished, and only the wind remained. Far away, beneath the ruined stones of Mordor, faint voices stirred once more. They spoke as one, soft as breath, yet vast as thunder. The crown awakens, and the land trembled, as though the heart of the world had begun to beat again. The black slopes of Orodruin rose before Halion, like the bones of a dead god. Smoke trailed from its heights, faint yet steady, and the air around it was warm, though winter's breath swept the plains below. It had slept long since the ring's destruction, its fires stilled by the fall of its master, but now it pulsed again with life, faint and terrible, as though the mountain itself remembered the voice that once commanded it. Halion climbed alone. No man of Gondor had set foot here since the end of the Third Age, and the way was lost to maps. The ground cracked beneath his boots, and streams of hot vapor hissed between the stones. In the east, the pale sun rose through a haze of dust, casting long shadows that seemed to move even when he stood still. He bore no company, no banner, no song. The shard was gone, yet its echo lived within him, an ember that beat in his heart like the slow toll of a distant drum. He had not eaten or slept in days, yet strength beyond mortal measure carried him. He knew now that it was not his own. By dusk, he reached the plain before the mountain's gate, where once the orcs of Mordor had marched to war. The ruins of their forges lay scattered like bones, and the very air shimmered with heat rising from cracks in the ground. Here, at last, Halion dismounted and set his hand upon the black stone. "I have come as you willed," he said softly, though there was no one to hear. "If I am your vessel, then let this end with me." The wind stirred the ash. From far within the mountain came a low rumble, and a voice answered, not aloud, but in his mind, vast and echoing. "You are not my vessel, son of men. You are my fire, clothed in flesh." Halion fell to his knees, pain lancing through his chest. The ground seemed to breathe beneath him, and the red glow of the fissures flared brighter. Visions swam before his eyes. 13 flames rising from the deep, a crown of living fire turning in the dark, and a face, neither man nor shadow, watching him with eyes of molten gold. "The crown must return," the voice said, "and you shall bear it." "No," Halion gasped. "I am no servant of shadow." The mountain thundered in reply. From its side, a fissure burst open, spilling fire across the plain. In that fire stood figures, 13 of them, tall and terrible, their bodies made of flame and smoke. They moved like dancers in a storm, circling him. The first among them stepped forward, its form shifting between light and darkness. "You carry the last shard within you. The circle is complete. The crown will be remade." Helion rose unsteadily, drawing his sword. Its steel glowed red in the firelight. "Then strike, if you would see it done. But know this, I am no servant of the Dark Lord. I am Halion of Gondor, sworn to the king and to the light that once blessed these lands." The demon laughed, a sound like molten stone breaking. "Your king's light fades, mortal. The world turns and even stars burn out. We endure." The 13 raised their arms, and from their bodies streams of flame flowed together, joining in the air above them. The fire twisted and coiled, shaping itself into a great circlet, a crown vast enough to eclipse the sky. Its light burned white and red, and the heat of it scorched the very air. Halion staggered, shielding his eyes. "No!" he shouted. "It ends here!" He plunged his sword into the earth. The blade sank deep, and from its wound poured light, not red, but silver, cold and clear. The fire recoiled as if struck. From the west, a wind rose, a wind that carried with it the scent of the sea and the echo of distant voices, fair and sorrowful. The song of the elves. Lindir's voice came to him, soft as the breeze. "Hold fast, Halion. The light is not gone while any heart still remembers it." Halion gripped the hilt with both hands. The silver light grew, spreading outward like a tide, washing over the flames. The demons screamed, their shapes unraveling, yet still they fought against the light, their fire striking at him like whips. Pain filled him. The ember in his chest flared, burning with every heartbeat. He felt his strength slipping away, his body breaking beneath the weight of fire and will, yet still he held the sword. "By the blood of Gondor," he cried, "by the grace of the West, I cast you out." The silver light burst forth in a wave that shook the mountain. The crown shattered, its fragments flung skyward like sparks. The demons were consumed, their cries fading into nothing. For a heartbeat, the fires of Orodruin blazed brighter than the sun, and then went out. Silence fell. Helion knelt amid the ashes. His sword lay broken at his feet, the last wisp of silver light fading from the blade. The air was cool again, the mountain still. Arthon found him there at dawn. He had followed in secret, fearing what would come. The sight that met him froze his blood. The plain blackened, the fires dead, and Halion kneeling before the mouth of the mountain, motionless. "Captain!" Arthon ran forward, dropping to his knees beside him. Halion opened his eyes slowly. They were no longer grey, but faintly silver, like moonlight reflected in water. "It is done," he whispered. "The crown is broken." Arthon looked toward the mountain. "And the fire?" "Gone," Helion said. "Or sleeping. I have bound it again, but this time there is no prison save myself." Arthon stared at him. "Then you—" Helion managed a faint smile. "I am no longer wholly of this world." He reached into his cloak and drew forth a small object, the hilt of his sword, its steel melted into a smooth, curved shape like a shard of glass. It glowed faintly red. "The last ember," he said. "Keep it from all hands. Promise me." Arthon hesitated, then took it. "I will." Helion's gaze turned east, where the sun rose beyond the Efelduath. "Tell the king that Mordor sleeps, but if ever the fire stirs again, he must not send men to fight it. Fire cannot be slain by steel." He stood then, tall and still, and for a moment Arthon thought he saw light beneath his skin, a faint shimmer like starlight behind glass. The wind rose, carrying the scent of ash and salt. "Farewell, my friend," Helion said. "Guard what remains. My road ends here." Before Arthon could speak, a tremor passed through the earth, gentle as a sigh. The ground split at Helion's feet, and from it rose a column of white flame. He stepped into it without fear. When the light faded, he was gone. For a long time, Arthon knelt upon the blackened plain. At last he turned and rode west, the shard hidden against his heart. Behind him, Orodruin stood silent once more. Yet in its depths, far below where no man could ever walk, a faint red glow pulsed in the dark, a slow, steady heartbeat waiting to wake. And upon the wind, soft as a dying breath, came a whisper. "The crown remembers." Arthon returned to Minas Tirith beneath a sky the color of iron. His horse limped, and the dust of Mordor clung to his cloak, but he rode on without pause until he reached the gates of the White City. The guards, seeing the black mark upon his armor and the grief upon his face, opened the way without question. When he came before the king, the great hall was silent, save for the whisper of banners stirring in the wind. Elisar sat upon the high throne, his hair now streaked with silver, his gaze still keen as the sea. "Rise, Arthon of Ithilien," said the king. "You bring tidings from the east." Arthon knelt. "My lord, the fires of Orodruin are quenched. The Captain Helion is gone. He went alone into the mountain and has not returned." A murmur passed through the court, but the king lifted his hand for silence. "Gone," he said softly. "He broke the last of the fire that lingered beneath the land," Arthon answered. "He bound it again with his life. Yet he bade me warn you. Mordor sleeps, but it is not dead." From the shadows near the throne, Prince Eldarion stepped forward, young and fierce-eyed. "Then we must destroy what remains, tear down every stone, seal every fissure." The king shook his head. "Fire cannot be slain by steel, my son. We may guard against it, but to rouse it is folly. The land itself must heal." Arthon drew from his cloak a small, curved shard, once the hilt of Halion's sword, now smooth and faintly glowing. The red light within it flickered like a heartbeat. "He gave me this, sire. He called it the last ember. It burns still." Elisar descended from the throne, and when he took the shard in his hands, he winced as though it scalded him. "This is no common relic," he said. "It is bound to spirit, not flesh." He turned to the lawmaster standing near. "Send word to Rivendell and to the Havens. This must be hidden in a place no shadow can reach." Yet even as he spoke, the shard's glow brightened, and the hall darkened with it. The torches guttered, and for a moment all sound ceased. Then, faint but clear, came a whisper from the shard itself, soft as breath, yet heard by all. The crown remembers. A chill passed through the court. The light faded, leaving silence in its wake. The king closed his hand around the shard and spoke firmly. "This thing is accursed. It will not rest within my walls." So it was decided that the shard would be borne west to the sea and cast into the depths beyond the reach of men. Arthur was chosen to carry it, for he alone had touched the shadow and lived. He departed that very night, travelling first through the green lands of Lebanon, and then down to the coasts of Belfalas, where the waves beat endlessly upon the white cliffs. The sky was pale and cold, and gulls wheeled above the surf like scraps of torn parchment. At the haven of Dol Amroth, he found a ship waiting, small and swift, built by elven hands long ago. Its captain was an elf of the Falas, silent and grave. Together they set sail into the western sea. For many days they voyaged beneath changing skies. The land faded, the air grew salt and strange. At night the stars burned brighter, and sometimes Arthur thought he heard faint voices singing far over the water. Songs too old and sorrowful to be of mortal kind. But the shard grew hotter the farther west they went. It burned through its wrappings, and when Arthur tried to lift it, it seared his palm. The elf captain watched with troubled eyes. "This thing was not made to cross the sea," he said. "Its roots are in the earth. If we bear it too far, it will waken." Arthur looked eastward, where the faint outline of the world's edge glimmered like smoke. "Then where can it rest?" The elf's gaze turned north. "There is an isle, hidden among storms, where no ship willingly sails. There the sea meets the roots of the world, and the waters drown even fire. There it may sleep." They turned their course, sailing through days of grey rain and wind. At last the storm rose, a vast wall of cloud and thunder that swallowed sky and sea alike. Lightning split the heavens, and the ship groaned beneath the waves. Yet they pressed on until the water itself grew black as ink. At the heart of that storm lay a whirlpool vast as a city, spinning endlessly. Its depths glowed faintly red, as though some fire burned far below. "The Sea of the Dead," the elf said. "Throw it now, before it claims us." Arthur took the shard. It burned in his hand, and from its light he thought he saw faces within the storm, pale and sorrowing, the ghosts of those lost to the waves. A whisper filled his mind. The crown must return. He hesitated only a heartbeat. "Then let it return to nothing," he said, and hurled it into the sea. The shard vanished beneath the waves. For a moment, all was still. Then the whirlpool flared red, brighter and brighter, until it seemed the very ocean was aflame. The ship reeled, and the wind screamed. But at last the light dimmed, the sea calmed, and the storm broke apart. The elf bowed his head. "It is done." They turned their prow eastward once more. Yet Arthur, standing at the stern, watched the water where the shard had sunk. Deep below for an instant, he thought he saw something vast and golden move, a crown of fire turning in the dark. When they returned to Minas Tirith, the city rejoiced. The king welcomed him with honor, and all believed the shadow banished at last. The shard was gone, the mountain stilled, and the world breathed easy. But that night, as Arthur stood upon the walls, he looked eastward toward the faint line of the mountains. There, just above the horizon, a single red star burned, new and bright. He bowed his head. "Rest now, Hellion," he murmured, "if rest you can." And far beneath the waves of the western sea, where no light had shone since the world began, a faint glow pulsed once more, slow and patient, like the beating of a heart waiting to wake. The sea whispered against the deeps, echoing through the dark. Years passed, and Middle-earth grew quiet once more. The Fourth Age ripened into its later years, and men prospered beneath the rule of King Elisar. The cities of Gondor gleamed in the sunlight. The White Tree blossomed year after year, and the shadow upon the east was forgotten by all, save a few grey-headed soldiers who still dreamed of fire. Arthon lived among them, though he aged more slowly than other men. The healers said it was the blessing of long service, but he knew better. He had touched the shard. Its fire had brushed his soul. At night he sometimes dreamed of waves whispering beneath a crimson sky, and of a faint red light gleaming far below the sea. When he woke, his heart would be racing, and for a moment he would swear he heard Halion's voice calling across the water. So the years turned. Elisar passed at last beyond the circles of the world, and Eldarion took the throne. The age of great deeds was done, and peace, though heavy and strange, settled upon the realm. But peace is a fragile thing. It began with small signs. Fishermen on the coasts of Belfalas spoke of strange lights beneath the water, soft, shifting gleams like fire seen through glass. Then the tides grew restless, and storms rose without warning, battering ships and breaking the harbors. The sailors of Dol Amroth brought word of a red glow far out to sea, deep in the western waters where none dared sail. When these tidings reached Minas Tirith, Eldarion summoned Arthon. The old captain came slowly, stooped but unbroken, his eyes still clear as frost. "My lord," he said, kneeling, "the sea stirs. I have felt it in my dreams. The shard we cast away is not gone." Eldarion paced before the throne. "If it returns, how shall we fight it? My father is gone, and the elves have left this world. Who now shall guard us?" Arthon bowed his head. "Fire cannot be fought with sword or shield, but there is still one who may hold it at bay." "Who?" "Halion." The king frowned. "He is dead." "Perhaps," said Arthon. "Yet his spirit was bound to the flame. If the fire wakes again, he will not rest. He will rise with it, or against it." So it was decided that a company of ships would sail west, beyond the reach of chart or compass, to find the source of the glow and learn what had stirred. Arthon, though aged beyond measure, begged leave to go. "If this began with me," he said, "let it end with me also." The king consented. A single vessel was chosen, a grey ship of Númenórean craft, built for the deep sea. It bore no banner, for this voyage was not for pride or conquest. They set forth at dawn, sailing from the haven of Pelagia with the wind at their backs. The sea was calm at first, and the gulls followed them for many leagues. But as they neared the western waters, a strange stillness fell. The sky dimmed though the sun yet shone, and the color of the sea deepened to a dark, living red. The sailors grew fearful. At night they saw shapes moving beneath the waves, vast and slow, glimmering with inner fire. Once a voice rose from the deep, soft as the murmur of the tide. The crown remembers. On the seventh night, the storm came. It was not born of wind or weather, but of power. Lightning of crimson hue tore the heavens, and the sea lifted in walls higher than mountains. The ship was driven westward, beyond sight of land or star. Amid the tempest, Arthon stood at the prow, his hair white in the red light. "Show yourself," he cried into the wind. "If you yet live, Halion, show yourself." For a long time there was only thunder. Then the sea parted. From its heart rose a figure, tall and terrible, formed of light and shadow mingled. Its face was that of a man, yet not mortal. Its eyes burned like coals. "Arthon," it said, and its voice was the voice of fire and wind. "Why do you call me from the deep? Because the world stirs again, Arthur answered. The shard was not ended. The crown wakes. The being looked down upon him, sorrow and flame mingling in its gaze. I am no longer wholly of this world. The fire and I are one. I keep it bound, but my strength wanes. If it breaks free, all will burn. Then bind it again, Arthur cried, for the sake of the realm you died to save. Helion's face turned toward the west, where the sea burned red. There is no binding without sacrifice. The fire must have a vessel. Long have I borne it, but soon I shall fade. Another must take my place. Arthur stepped forward, rain and sea spray lashing his face. Then take me. Helion's eyes widened. You know not what you offer. I have lived long past my time. If this is the end of my road, let it serve the light. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Helion reached out a hand of flame. So be it. The wind howled and the ship shuddered. The sailors cried out as a great column of light rose from the sea, swallowing both men. The storm broke apart in a blaze of silver fire that split the clouds and lit the world from horizon to horizon. When dawn came, the sea was calm again. The ship drifted upon glassy waters, and the sailors found no trace of Arthur. Only at the bow, where he had stood, a faint red ember glowed, set into the wood like a jewel. It pulsed gently, like the beating of a heart. They turned the ship homeward. As they sailed east, the glow beneath the waves faded, and the sea grew quiet once more. When they returned to Minas Tirith, the king listened to their tale in silence. He ordered that no ship sail west again, and that the ember be kept in the tower hall, sealed within crystal and guarded day and night. Years turned to decades, and the story of Halion and Arthur passed into legend. Children of Gondor spoke of them as myths, heroes who had tamed the last fire of the Dark Lord. Yet sometimes, when the wind blew from the sea at sunset, the folk of the White City thought they heard faint singing from the waves, a voice both mortal and immortal, sorrowful, yet steadfast. And in the deep chambers of the tower, where the crystal gleamed faintly in the shadows, the ember would stir, glowing brighter for a heartbeat before sinking back into rest. Beneath it, carved in stone by an unknown hand, were the words, "The fire sleeps, but the fire remembers." And far below the world, beneath the roots of the sea and the ashes of mountains, a crown of flame turned slowly in the dark, dreaming of the day when the hearts of men would again hunger for power. When that day comes, the world will tremble once more, for in the language of the forgotten fires, there is no word for it.